The town of Red Creek didn't believe in kindness unless it came polished, perfumed, and smiling with straight white teeth. It was the kind of place where people judged you before you opened your mouth and remembered your mistakes longer than your name. And in that town lived Clara Bell, a girl who walked with her head down and her shoulders folded inward like she was apologizing for existing. Clara wasn't ugly, not truly, but she believed she was. Years of whispers had shaped her reflection. Boys had laughed when she passed. Women had offered pity disguised as advice. "A little powder," they'd say. "A different dress. Maybe smile more." She tried. God, she tried. But no amount of effort could change the quiet sadness in her eyes. Her mother used to say beauty was kindness made visible. But her mother was gone now, buried under a crooked white cross on the hill. And without her, Clara's world shrank into chores, silence, and surviving one more day without hearing someone laugh. The ranch at the edge of town hired her because they needed hands, not charm. Old Mr. Jenkins barely looked at faces anyway. Clara fed horses, cleaned stalls, and slept in the tiny room above the barn, where wind rattled the window like someone knocking. She told herself it was enough, until the cowboy came. He rode into Red Creek at sunset, dust trailing behind him like a storm that had lost its way. His hat shadowed sharp blue eyes, and his coat looked like it had crossed deserts and winters both. People noticed him immediately, not because he was handsome, though he was, but because he didn't seem to need anyone's approval. His name was Ethan Cole, and he didn't look at Clara the way others did. He looked at her like she was a person. Clara first spoke to Ethan when she spilled a bucket of grain across his boots. She froze, expecting anger. She expected the laugh, the sigh, the "watch it, girl." Instead, Ethan crouched down beside her, scooping grain into his hat with rough hands. "No harm done," he said simply. His voice sounded like worn leather and campfire smoke. Warm, calm, honest. She couldn't look at him. "Sorry," she whispered. He tilted his head. "Why you whispering like you stole something?" Clara shrugged. Words were dangerous. They led to attention, and attention led to judgment. Days passed. Ethan stayed at the ranch, fixing fences and breaking a wild mare no one else dared touch. He worked hard, spoke little, and listened more than anyone Clara had ever known. One evening, he found her sitting by the corral after dark, crying quietly into her sleeve. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside her. Minutes stretched. The wind moved through dry grass like a tired sigh. Finally, she said it. "I'm not pretty." The words came out cracked, small, broken by years of believing them. She expected silence. Instead, Ethan chuckled softly. "That's fine," he said. "I need honest, not fancy." Clara blinked. He kept looking at the horizon like he hadn't just changed her world. Ethan didn't explain himself right away. He wasn't a man of speeches. But over the next weeks, he showed her what he meant. He praised her work ethic before her looks. He trusted her with the wild mare. He listened to her thoughts about the ranch like they mattered. When townsfolk mocked her, he didn't fight them. He simply stood beside her until their laughter died in their throats. One afternoon, Clara asked him why. He said, "Pretty fades. Honest days. I've chased pretty before. Cost me everything." She learned he'd loved once, a woman who dazzled rooms but lied to his heart. She left him broke and alone. "And you?" he asked gently. "Who taught you you're not enough?" Clara told him about schoolyard laughter, broken mirrors, and how even kindness from strangers sounded like pity. Ethan shook his head slowly. "World's loud with lies," he said, "but truth's quieter. Takes courage to hear it." For the first time in years, Clara lifted her head, and Red Creek noticed. The summer drought turned cruel, grass went brittle, tempers flared. Then one night, lightning struck the hills, and fire roared toward the ranch. Chaos swallowed Red Creek. Horses screamed. Smoke swallowed the stars. Clara ran into the barn again and again, freeing animals while sparks burned holes into her dress. Ethan found her coughing, half-conscious, dragging a stubborn colt toward the gate. "You'll die in there!" he shouted. "So will he," she cried back. He stared at her, not as a fragile girl, but as something fierce and bright. He lifted the colt, carried it out, and when the roof finally fell, they stood together watching flames devour months of work. Clara thought she'd be blamed. Instead, Ethan said, "You were brave." No one had ever said that to her before. The next morning, Red Creek gathered to rebuild. For the first time, Clara didn't hide behind the barn. She worked in sunlight, suit on her cheeks, hair tangled, eyes steady, and people saw her, not as pretty, not as ugly, as strong. Weeks later, Clara stood before a cracked mirror in the bunkhouse. She expected the same old girl, but something had shifted. She saw scars on her hands from the fire. She saw tired eyes, but kinder, braver. Ethan knocked lightly. "You okay?" She turned. Her voice didn't whisper this time. "I still don't think I'm pretty." He smiled gently. "Good. Means you won't waste time chasing it." She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and bright. "Why do you stay?" she asked. "You could go anywhere." Ethan looked around the half-rebuilt ranch. "Because you remind me what matters," he said. "Truth, kindness, grit. Those things don't wrinkle." She stepped closer, heart racing. "No one ever chose me before." "I'm not choosing you for show," he said quietly. "I'm choosing you for life." Autumn came soft and gold. The ranch stood stronger than before. And one morning Clara walked into town beside Ethan. Head high, people stared. Not because she was suddenly beautiful, but because she wasn't hiding anymore. Mrs. Hargrove smiled at her. The boys who used to laugh tipped their hats awkwardly. "Old Mr. Jenkins said, 'Proud of you, girl.'" Clara squeezed Ethan's hand. "You were wrong," she said softly. "About what? You said you needed honest, not fancy." He looked confused. She smiled. "Turns out, I needed that too." They watched the sun rise over Red Creek, lighting fields rebuilt by courage, not perfection. And Clara finally understood something her mother once said. Beauty isn't what they see, it's what survives. And sometimes the bravest love story begins with a whisper, "I'm not pretty." And someone brave enough to answer, "That's fine, I need honest, not